Picture this. It is the last Saturday of February 2026. Somewhere over the Persian Gulf, the night sky lights up. Not with stars. With fire. Hundreds of American warplanes are cutting through the dark, dropping bombs on a country that American presidents have been threatening for over 4 decades. Simultaneously, in the streets of Tehran, explosions shake windows. Buildings crack. People run. And somewhere in a bunker deep beneath that ancient city, Iran's supreme leader, the man who ruled his country with an iron fist for nearly 35 years, is killed. This is not a movie. This is not a simulation. This actually happened. Right now. As you are watching this video. The world has changed. The Middle East is on fire. American soldiers are dying in Kuwait. Iranian missiles are raining down on Bahrain, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and Qatar. The Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway that carries 20% of the world's oil, has been shut down. Oil prices are spiking toward $100 a barrel. And in Washington, D.C., the President of the United States is sitting in the White House, telling the world that combat operations will continue until all objectives are achieved. Welcome. My name is your host. And today we are going to sit down together and talk about 3 of the most important, most dramatic, most world-changing military stories unfolding right now, this week, in real time. These are not old stories. These are not history lessons. These are happening today. And they affect every single one of us, whether we know it or not. Get comfortable. Because what you are about to hear will shake you. It will make you feel something. And when it is over, you will understand this world a little better than you did before you pressed play. Let us begin. Story 1, Operation Epic Fury, the United States and Israel strike Iran. Let me take you back just a little. Back to December 28, 2025. That is the day the spark was lit. Shopkeepers in Tehran's famous Grand Bazaar walked out of their stalls and took to the streets. They were furious. Iran's currency had just collapsed. Inflation was running wild. People could not afford bread. Could not pay rent. Could not survive. And the anger that had been simmering beneath the surface for years finally boiled over. Within days, those protests spread across the country. From the bazaars of Tehran to the streets of Isfahan, Tabriz, Shiraz, and beyond. Men, women, young people, old people, all of them pouring into the streets demanding change. And what did the government do? What did the men in power do when their own people stood up and said we cannot live like this? They cracked down. Hard. On January 8, 2026, the Iranian government cut off the entire internet. The entire country went dark. No communication. No news. No videos. Nothing going out. Nothing coming in. Human Rights Watch, one of the most respected human rights organizations on the planet, gathered evidence of what happened next. Protesters were not just arrested. They were shot. Shot in the head. Shot in the torso. Killed in the streets. The Iranian government later claimed 3,117 people died in those crackdowns. But human rights activists on the ground counted at least 6,126 deaths. 6,000 people. Killed by their own government. And the real number, those activists admitted, could not even be independently verified because the country was sealed shut. Now, President Donald Trump had been watching all of this. And he was furious too. On January 13, speaking in Detroit, he looked directly into the cameras and told the Iranian protesters, "Keep protesting. Help is on its way." He vowed to punish the security forces responsible for those killings. He canceled all diplomatic talks. And then, quietly, the Pentagon started moving chess pieces on the board. In late January 2026, the United States began the largest military buildup in the Middle East since the 2003 invasion of Iraq. Think about that for a moment. The biggest military deployment to that region in over 20 years. 2 aircraft carrier strike groups were ordered into the area. The USS Abraham Lincoln, carrying F-35C Lightning II fighters, F/A-18 Super Hornets, Growler electronic warfare jets, and E-2 Hawkeye surveillance aircraft, arrived in the region on January 26. Then, on February 13, the USS Gerald R. Ford, one of the most powerful warships ever built, also set sail. American F-22 Raptors, the most advanced air superiority fighters in the world, were deployed to bases in Israel. F-15E Strike Eagles were positioned in Jordan. Tanker aircraft were moved into position across the theater. The pieces were all being set up on the board. But the world still hoped. Diplomats were still talking. Back channels were open. The Swiss, who have long served as a communications link between Washington and Tehran since the two countries have no formal diplomatic relations, were passing messages back and forth. People were hoping that somehow, some way, this could be resolved without shooting. It could not. On February 28, 2026, at what military officials later described as the opening salvo of Operation Epic Fury, the United States and Israel launched a massive, coordinated military strike on Iran. The Israeli Air Force dropped more than 1,200 munitions across 24 of Iran's 31 provinces in the opening 24 hours alone. American B-2 Spirit stealth bombers, flying from their bases in the continental United States on missions that lasted many hours, struck Iran's nuclear infrastructure in what military analysts later called Operation Midnight Hammer. These same radar-invisible aircraft have been described as the most capable strategic bombers ever built. And on that night, they flew into the most heavily defended airspace in the Middle East and came back home. Trump said the operation had hit hundreds of targets in Iran. Iranian Revolutionary Guard facilities. Air defense systems. An Iranian naval building. 9 ships were sunk. The majority of Iran's senior military leadership, including the nation's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who had led the Islamic Republic since 1989, was killed in that first wave of strikes. Let that sink in. The man who had stood defiantly against the West for almost 4 decades. The man who chanted death to America from mosque pulpits. The man who had been the face of Iran's revolution and its nuclear ambitions. Killed. Just like that. In the opening hours of an American-Israeli military operation. Iran's response was immediate and overwhelming. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps launched attacks on 27 American military bases across the Middle East. Missiles and drones slammed into Bahrain, hitting the headquarters of the United States Navy's 5th Fleet. American sailors ducked for cover as explosions rocked the base. Iranian missiles targeted Dubai International Airport, one of the world's busiest. Explosions were heard in Abu Dhabi, in Doha, in Kuwait, in Jordan, in Saudi Arabia. The entire region was under attack from Iranian missiles and drones. And then came the casualties. 3 American service members were killed in Kuwait on the evening of Sunday, March 1. Then a 4th. Then, within days, the total climbed to at least 6 confirmed American military deaths. 6 young men and women who put on the uniform of the United States and paid the ultimate price. Families back home got the knock on the door that every military family dreads. That knock that changes everything. That knock that turns the world upside down. In Karachi, Pakistan, 9 protesters were killed storming the American consulate in rage over the operation. Vladimir Putin, sitting in the Kremlin in Moscow, called the targeted killing of Iran's supreme leader a cynical murder. China's foreign minister said the attack was unacceptable. The European Union called for maximum restraint. France's Emmanuel Macron demanded an emergency United Nations Security Council meeting. The entire world was reacting. But Trump was not stopping. He recorded a 6-minute video and posted it to Truth Social. His tone was firm. His words were definitive. Combat operations will continue, he said. They will continue until all of our objectives are achieved. And meanwhile, the Strait of Hormuz, that narrow passage between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman, through which roughly 20% of the world's oil supply flows every single day, went essentially quiet. Iran declared it closed. Tanker traffic came to a halt. Oil prices shot into the high 70s per barrel, with analysts warning they could top $100 if the blockade continued. China, which relies on Iran for a significant portion of its oil imports, was watching nervously. The global economy was holding its breath. This story is not over. Not even close. As of this recording, explosions are still being heard across the region. American planes are still in the air. Iranian missiles are still being launched. And the people in the Gulf states, ordinary civilians who had nothing to do with any of this, are sheltering in place, listening to the sound of air defense systems engaging targets overhead, praying that the next explosion is not the one that hits their building. This is the reality of war. It does not stay where it starts. It spreads. It touches everything. And right now, it is touching the entire Middle East. Story 2, the Golden Dome, America's plan to build a shield around the sky. Now let us step back from the fire and smoke for a moment. Let us talk about something that has been happening in the background, quietly, relentlessly, and with more money attached to it than almost anything the Pentagon has ever attempted. It is called the Golden Dome. And it might be the single most ambitious, most expensive, most controversial military project in American history. Here is the idea. You know how Israel has the Iron Dome? That system that shoots rockets out of the sky before they land on Israeli cities. The system that has saved thousands of lives over the years. Well, imagine something like that. But instead of protecting one small country, it would protect the entire continental United States. All 3,800,000 square miles of it. Against ballistic missiles. Against hypersonic missiles. Against cruise missiles. Against drones. Against anything that any enemy, Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, anyone, could throw at it. That is the Golden Dome. And President Trump first announced it on January 27, 2025, signing an executive order directing the military to build it. Then, on May 20, 2025, he stood in front of the cameras and unveiled his vision. He said it would be operational within 3 years. He said it would cost approximately $175 billion. The critics and the experts nearly fell out of their chairs. The Congressional Budget Office said it could cost between $161 billion and $542 billion over 20 years. Republican senators who are actually involved in the program predicted it would ultimately cost trillions. Not billions. Trillions. The American Enterprise Institute, a respected think tank, put their estimate at $3.6 trillion. That is trillion with a T. The most expensive military project in human history, by an enormous margin. But the money has been flowing. Congress already allocated $24.4 billion through the reconciliation bill in 2025. Another $13 billion was approved in the fiscal year 2026 defense budget. The Missile Defense Agency launched a massive contracting vehicle called SHIELD, which stands for Scalable Homeland Innovative Enterprise Layer Defense, with a ceiling value of $151 billion. Defense companies from Lockheed Martin to smaller contractors are lining up to get a piece of this program. So what exactly would the Golden Dome do? Imagine layers. Multiple layers of defense, each one designed to catch threats that slip through the one before it. Space-based sensors watching for missile launches anywhere on Earth the moment they occur. Constellations of satellites equipped with infrared technology tracking every trajectory. Then interceptors. Some based on the ground, some at sea, some potentially in space, firing at incoming missiles while they are still outside the atmosphere, before they can reach American cities. Add to that directed energy weapons, high-powered lasers that could potentially destroy missiles at the speed of light, and you start to get a picture of what the Golden Dome is supposed to be. It has been compared to Ronald Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative, which people called Star Wars back in the 1980s. Reagan dreamed of a similar shield. It was never built. Critics say the Golden Dome faces the same fundamental problems. The technology for some of its most crucial components, especially boost phase intercept from space and defenses against maneuvering hypersonic missiles, simply does not fully exist yet. And even if you solve the technology problem, there is the economics problem. General Michael Getline, the man actually running this program, gave a remarkably candid speech at a conference in Los Angeles in January 2026. He said the current interceptors the United States has are extraordinary. They are the most capable on the planet. They almost never miss. But they take forever to build. They cost millions of dollars each. And as a result, the United States has what he called very small magazine depths. Very few shots. An enemy that understood this could potentially overwhelm the system by simply firing more missiles than there are interceptors to shoot them down. Getline said he has to flip that equation. He has to find ways to make intercepting missiles cheaper and faster. And there is another concern that keeps strategists up at night. If America builds a system that can stop Russian and Chinese nuclear missiles, those countries will not just sit there and accept it. They will build more missiles. They will develop decoys. They will create missiles that maneuver unpredictably in flight to avoid being shot down. By trying to defend yourself, you might actually make the world more dangerous. Because you have now given other nuclear powers an incentive to dramatically escalate their arsenals. Strategic stability, the balance of fear that has kept nuclear weapons from being used since 1945, depends on both sides knowing they cannot stop the other from retaliating. Take that away, and the calculation changes. Congress is deeply concerned too. In the defense appropriations bill passed just recently, lawmakers wrote pointed language criticizing the Defense Department for refusing to provide complete budgetary details and justification for the $23 billion already allocated. Lawmakers say they have not received a master deployment schedule. No cost schedule. No performance metrics. No finalized system architecture. They are essentially writing blank checks for a program they cannot properly oversee. And some are starting to push back. But President Trump is pushing forward. He has called this a Manhattan Project scale mission. And indeed, if it works, if even a fraction of what is promised can be delivered, it would transform American national security in a way not seen since the invention of nuclear weapons. The question is whether it can actually be done. Whether the technology is real. Whether the money is manageable. Whether the geopolitical fallout can be contained. And perhaps most urgently, whether the events unfolding in Iran right now, with Iranian missiles actually striking American military facilities in real time, make the case for the Golden Dome more compelling than any Pentagon briefing ever could. Story 3, China, Taiwan, and the slow-motion tension in the Pacific. And now we turn to the third story. The one that has fewer explosions right now, but carries within it the potential for a conflict that would dwarf everything we have discussed so far. The one that keeps military planners, diplomats, and intelligence analysts up at night more than almost anything else on Earth. We are talking about China. We are talking about Taiwan. And we are talking about what is happening in the waters and skies between them. Let us start with some context, because this story has deep roots. Taiwan is a democratic island of about 23 million people sitting roughly 100 miles off the coast of mainland China. The People's Republic of China has claimed Taiwan as its own territory for decades. Beijing insists that Taiwan is a rogue province that must eventually be reunited with the mainland, by force if necessary. Taiwan's people, the vast majority of them, disagree. They have built a thriving democracy. They have their own military, their own government, their own identity. And for decades, the United States has sold Taiwan weapons and made a somewhat ambiguous, deliberately vague commitment to its defense. This arrangement has held, imperfectly, for decades. But the ground is shifting. And the pace of change is accelerating. In the final days of December 2025, the People's Liberation Army conducted massive military exercises around Taiwan. They called it Justice Mission 2025. They simulated a full blockade of the island. Live-fire exercises encircled Taiwan's shores. For the first time since 2022, long-range projectiles were launched into the Taiwan Strait, one of the world's busiest shipping lanes. Western governments and Asian allies watched in alarm. The U.S. State Department, using language that analysts noted was stronger than even America's national security strategy, called on Beijing to immediately cease its military pressure. Then, on January 17, 2026, something happened that genuinely shocked military watchers. A Chinese People's Liberation Army drone, a WZ-7 known as the Soaring Dragon, a high-altitude surveillance aircraft, flew directly through Taiwanese airspace over Pratas Island, also called Dongsha Island. An unnamed Taiwanese national security official confirmed that this was likely the first confirmed violation of Taiwan's actual territorial airspace by a PLA aircraft in many years. Think about what that means. China did not just fly near Taiwan's airspace. It flew through it. And Taiwan's defenses at that location could not reach high enough to shoot it down. Taiwan's Ministry of National Defense condemned it as a serious disruption of regional peace. China's People's Liberation Army Southern Theater Command called it normal flight training. Normal. A deliberate violation of a neighbor's sovereign airspace, called normal. This is the pattern that experts find so alarming. China is normalizing these incursions. Bit by bit. Day by day. Small steps, each individually explainable, each individually deniable, each one moving the line a little further. The China Coast Guard began regular patrols into restricted waters around Taiwan's Kinmen Islands in February 2024. By February 2025, they had expanded those patrols to Pratas Island. Now drones are flying through Taiwanese airspace. The ratchet turns. And it rarely turns back. In January 2026, intelligence reports tracked more than 90 Chinese naval and Coast Guard vessels positioned across East Asian waters. One of Beijing's largest maritime deployments to date. The buildup coincided with tensions following statements by Japan's new Prime Minister, Sanai Takaichi, the first woman to lead Japan's government, who said a Chinese attack on Taiwan could constitute an existential threat for Japan. China responded to that statement by directing targeting radar at Japanese military aircraft during exercises near Okinawa. Not just flying nearby. Actually locking radar onto Japanese planes. The kind of action that, in a different moment, in a moment with less restraint on both sides, could trigger a shooting incident. The United States was direct in its response to that particular provocation. Washington publicly criticized China, calling the radar locking destabilizing and reaffirming its commitment to Japan's security. Two American B-52 strategic bombers flew joint operations with Japanese F-35 and F-15 fighters over the Sea of Japan, a visible message of combined military readiness. Meanwhile, the experts are watching the shipbuilding race with deep concern. The Chinese People's Liberation Army Navy is building warships at a pace that is genuinely remarkable. China is currently constructing or planning to construct multiple aircraft carriers, possibly including a nuclear-powered one, along with cruisers, destroyers, and frigates at rates that are outpacing American naval procurement. China's goal, according to recent reports, is to have 9 aircraft carriers in operation by 2035. For comparison, the United States currently operates 11 carriers. But the gap is closing. And the trajectory is clear. Taiwan, for its part, is responding. In early January 2026, Taiwan's military police added a new battalion specifically trained in air defense to its structure. President Lai Ching-te has proposed increasing Taiwan's defense spending to 5% of gross domestic product by 2030, up from 2.4% in 2025. Japan has approved its largest ever defense budget. South Korea increased defense spending by 8.2% for 2026. Australia moved toward a 7.3% nominal rise in defense spending. The entire Indo-Pacific is arming itself. A survey conducted by the Center for Strategic and International Studies in late 2025, polling dozens of former U.S. government officials and leading China experts, found that 43% believed the South China Sea was the most likely flashpoint for Chinese military escalation in 2026. 33% said the Taiwan Strait. These are not fringe voices. These are people who spent careers studying China, working in the intelligence community, and advising American presidents. And here is what makes the Taiwan situation so uniquely dangerous. A conflict there would not stay there. Japan, which has military commitments with the United States and whose islands sit directly in the path of any Chinese military operation in the region, would almost certainly be drawn in. American forces in Okinawa, Guam, and throughout the Pacific would be at risk. The Chinese ballistic missiles that flew over Taiwan in 2022 and landed in Japan's exclusive economic zone were a message. A very clear message. About where China believes the rules stop applying. The Trump administration's national security strategy has stated that deterring a conflict over Taiwan, ideally by preserving military overmatch, is a priority. But the very fact that you have to state it as a priority is itself a sign that people in Washington believe the deterrence equation is getting harder to maintain. Now layer onto all of this the events happening in Iran right now. With American forces actively engaged in combat operations in the Middle East, with American soldiers dying, with the Pentagon's attention and resources stretched across multiple theaters, what does that mean for America's ability to respond to a crisis in the Taiwan Strait if one erupts? Military planners are not publicly answering that question. But they are certainly asking it. The bigger picture. Let me take a breath here. Because I want to step back for a moment and think about what all of this means together. Not just as separate stories. But as a picture. A portrait of the world we are living in right now. In the Middle East, American and Israeli forces have killed the supreme leader of Iran and launched one of the biggest military operations in a generation. 6 American service members have given their lives. Iranian missiles are striking American military bases across the Gulf. The Strait of Hormuz is closed. Global energy markets are shaking. In Washington, a program called the Golden Dome is being built, or at least funded, with the ambition of making the continental United States invulnerable to missile attack. The most expensive military project ever conceived by any nation in human history. Trillions of dollars. Technology that in some cases does not yet exist. A debate raging about whether it will work, whether it will cause more instability than it prevents, and whether the American government even knows what it is building. In the Pacific, China is simulating blockades of Taiwan, violating Taiwanese airspace with drones, locking radar onto Japanese fighter jets, and building warships at a pace that is slowly closing the gap with American naval power. A region of 23 million free people hangs in a kind of suspended tension, watching and waiting, wondering if the next exercise will be the last exercise before something worse begins. These 3 stories are connected. They are all part of the same larger picture. A world in which the relative peace and stability that existed for much of the post-Cold War era is fracturing. In which old rules are being tested. Old deterrence calculations are being reconsidered. Old alliances are being strained and new ones are being forged. And at the center of all of it is the United States military. The most powerful fighting force in the history of the world. Being asked to do more, in more places, against more serious adversaries, than at perhaps any point since the Second World War. The men and women in uniform who serve in that force deserve our attention. They deserve our awareness. When we talk about these geopolitical chess games, we should always remember that the pieces on the board are human beings. They are somebody's son or daughter. Somebody's husband or wife. Somebody's best friend. When those 6 American service members were killed in Kuwait, 6 families had their lives destroyed. 6 people who woke up that morning with plans, with hopes, with everything ahead of them, did not come home. War is not a concept. War is not a policy paper. War is fire and noise and pain and loss. It is a mother getting a phone call. It is a flag folded into a triangle. It is a name that gets added to a memorial wall. So as we follow these stories, as we watch these events unfold in real time, let us hold on to that. Let us remember the weight of what we are talking about. Let us be informed. Let us be engaged. But let us also be humble about the gravity of it all. Conclusion. We started this video with the image of the sky over the Persian Gulf lighting up with fire, with the sound of explosions echoing through the streets of Tehran, with the shocking news that one of the most powerful men in the Middle East had been killed in an American-Israeli military strike. We talked about the Golden Dome, about the audacious, controversial, enormously expensive American project to put a shield over the entire United States, about the technology challenges, the political fights, the strategic debates, and the very real question of whether it can actually be done. And we talked about China and Taiwan, about the slow, patient, relentless Chinese pressure campaign against a small, democratic island, about the radar locks and the drone incursions and the naval buildups and the expert assessments that say 2026 is one of the most dangerous years for that part of the world in decades. These three stories are the world right now. Not the world of 20 years ago. Not the world of a history book. The world today. The world this week. The world right now. And you being here, watching this, paying attention, asking questions about what is happening and why it matters, that is how informed citizens engage with the world. That is how you stay ahead of the curve instead of being surprised when something affects your life, your family, your country. The world is moving fast. Events are escalating. Things that seemed unthinkable 18 months ago are now on the front page every single morning. Stay curious. Stay informed. Stay engaged. And if these stories matter to you, if you want to keep watching as events develop, then make sure you subscribe to this channel. Hit that notification bell. Because the next chapter of all three of these stories is already being written. And you are going to want to be here when it arrives. This has been your host. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. And thank you for caring about the world. Stay safe. Take care of each other. And we will talk again very soon.